You will never look at your own family the same way after hearing this story. My name is Evelyn Reed, and this is the story of the dangerous game I had to play to get my life back. If my stories give you strength, please consider looking at the thanks button below the video. Now, if you are ready, begin this walk with me through the cold corridors of betrayal. The telephone felt heavier than it should in my hand. Its familiar weight suddenly transformed into a leaden anchor, pulling me down into a sea of disbelief. I had dialed the number with a light heart, a simple, motherly question on my lips. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of quiet, sun-drenched day that holds no premonition of disaster. I was 68 years old, a widow for nearly 2 decades, and my world for the most part revolved around one person, my son, Daniel. I just wanted to ask about the wedding date, to finalize the arrangements for the suit I had planned to have tailored for the occasion, to confirm the flavor of the cake I had offered to bake for their rehearsal dinner. It was a call of love, of anticipation, a call that would shatter my entire existence in the space of 27 words. Daniel didn't answer. Instead, a voice, sharp and sweet like poisoned honey, chirped on the other end of the line. "Chloe speaking." "Oh, hello, dear," I said, a genuine warmth in my voice. "It's Evelyn. Is Daniel there?" I just had a quick question about the wedding preparations. There was a beat of silence on the other end, a pause so pregnant with unspoken things that a cold dread began to crawl up my spine. When she finally spoke, her voice had shed its artificial sweetness, leaving behind something cold, brittle, and sharp. "The wedding?" she asked, a laugh tinkling in her tone, a sound like breaking glass. "Oh, Evelyn, the wedding was last Saturday. It was beautiful. We only invited special people." The line went dead, but I kept the receiver pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone as if it were a final, mocking verdict. Special people. The 2 words echoed in the cavernous silence of my small, empty house. They ricocheted off the walls, off the framed photographs of a smiling baby Daniel on the mantelpiece, off the worn-out armchair where I had spent countless nights waiting up for him when he was a teenager. Special people. I, his mother, was not special. I, who had paid the $500 deposit for their wedding venue 3 months ago. I, who had transferred $1,000 to Chloe's account last month for what she called dress emergencies. I, who for the past 3 years had dutifully paid their rent, their car insurance, and filled their refrigerator when Daniel had been between jobs. I, who had sacrificed, saved, and scraped by, pouring every spare dollar and every ounce of my love into their lives, was not, it turned in fact, a special person. I slowly placed the phone back in its cradle, my hand trembling so violently that the plastic rattled. My legs gave out from under me, and I sank onto the floor, my back sliding down the floral wallpaper of the hallway. The sunlight streaming through the window seemed cruel now, its warmth a stark contrast to the glacial ice spreading through my veins. The house was silent, but my mind was screaming. It was a raw, primal scream of a creature that had just been gutted. I thought of the dress hanging in my closet, a beautiful, deep blue silk dress that had cost me $200, a significant sum for a retired woman on a fixed income. I had bought it for the wedding. I had imagined myself standing proudly in the front pew, watching my only child begin his new life. I had pictured the photographs, the smiles, the toasts. Now, that dress was nothing more than a shroud for a dream that had just been murdered. My first coherent thought was a desperate, grasping denial. It had to be a mistake, a cruel joke. Perhaps Chloe was angry with me for some unknown transgression. Maybe Daniel didn't know she had said this. He would call back. He would apologize, explain everything. He would tell me it was a misunderstanding. I stared at the phone, willing it to ring, praying for it to deliver me from this sudden, suffocating nightmare. But the phone remained silent. It was a silent accomplice to their betrayal, a witness to my stunning demotion from mother to what? A convenience, an ATM, a fool. Yes, most definitely a fool. The kind of fool only a mother's unconditional love can create. And in that moment, slumped on my hallway floor, the world I had so carefully built around my son crumbled into dust, and I was left alone in the ruins with nothing but the echo of those two cruel, world-ending words, special people. My husband Robert had died 19 years ago. A sudden, massive heart attack at the age of 51 had stolen him from me, leaving a hole in my life that I thought would never be filled. He was a good man, a builder with calloused hands and a gentle heart, and he had been the bedrock of my world. His death left me with two things, a modest but paid-for house, and our 17-year-old son, Daniel. In my grief, I poured everything I had left, every ounce of love, every shred of energy, every dollar from Robert's life insurance, into Daniel. He became my singular purpose, the vessel for all my hopes and dreams. I saw Robert in his eyes, in the way he smiled, in the determined set of his jaw. My life's mission became ensuring that he would have every opportunity I never did. I had been running a small home-based catering business, a passion I'd turned into a modest living. After Robert's death, I took it to another level. I worked 16-hour days, my hands raw from chopping vegetables and scrubbing pots. I took on every wedding, every office party, every funeral luncheon I could find. Sleep became a luxury, and my own needs were relegated to a distant back burner. The profits from the business weren't for me. They were for the Daniel Fund. This fund paid for his SAT prep courses, his college applications, and eventually his tuition at a decent state university where he studied business administration. I remember the pride that swelled in my chest as I watched him walk across the graduation stage, the first in our family to earn a degree. It felt like my victory as much as his. Every exhausted morning and every lonely night had been worth it for that single moment. I had done it. I had given Robert's son the future we had always dreamed of for him. For a few years after college, things were good. Daniel got a junior position at a marketing firm in the city, an hour's drive away. He lived at home to save money, and our little house was filled with his youthful energy again. He was thoughtful then, bringing me flowers sometimes, or insisting on taking me out to dinner with his first paychecks. He was my boy, my sweet, successful boy. And then he met Chloe. She was beautiful. I couldn't deny that. She had a polished, sophisticated air that was completely foreign to our simple working-class world. Her family, as Daniel proudly told me, was old money. They had a summer home in the Hamptons and a winter condo in Aspen. Chloe worked in an art gallery, a job that seemed to involve more socializing than actual work. From the very beginning, I felt like a rough, uncultured stone next to her flawless diamond. She was never overtly rude, not at first. Her insults were subtle, delivered with a bright smile. She'd compliment my home-cooked meals by saying they were so charmingly rustic, or admire the quilt on my bed by remarking how quaint it was. Each word was a tiny, polite dagger, reminding me of the chasm between her world and mine. Daniel was utterly besotted. He began to change, shedding his old self like a snake shedding its skin. His comfortable jeans and sweaters were replaced by designer labels. He started using words like synergy and monetize in casual conversation. He developed a taste for expensive wines and artisanal cheeses, and he began to see his childhood home, and by extension me, through Chloe's critical eyes. "Mom, you really should update this kitchen," he'd say, wrinkling his nose at my perfectly functional but admittedly dated Formica countertops. Chloe's parents have a Viking range. I would just smile and nod, telling myself this was normal. My son was moving up in the world. I should be proud. The financial request started about 6 months into their relationship. It began innocently enough. Mom, we're a little short for the deposit on our new apartment. Could you possibly lend us a few thousand? We'll pay you back as soon as my bonus comes through. The bonus never seemed to materialize, and the money was never paid back. But my heart ached to see them happy, to help them build their life together. So I gave it to them, withdrawing it from the savings account I had painstakingly built for my own retirement. That was the first crack in the dam. Soon the trickle became a flood. It was always an emergency, always a temporary setback. Their rent was $1,500 a month for a chic downtown apartment I had only seen in pictures. For 3 years, I paid it. A wire transfer on the first of every month, as reliable as the sunrise. It's just until Daniel gets that big promotion, Mom. Then we'll be set. The promotion was a perpetually receding horizon. Then came the car. Chloe's old convertible had broken down, and she absolutely needed a reliable vehicle for her commute. Daniel co-signed a loan for a brand new SUV, but soon they were struggling with the $500 monthly payments, so I took those over too. Groceries became another line item in my shadow budget for them. Chloe was passionate about organic farm-to-table food, which apparently cost a small fortune. I'd get calls from Daniel, his voice low and embarrassed. Mom, Chloe's making a special dinner for some important people from the gallery. Could you help us out with the grocery bill? And I would, transferring another $200 without a word of protest. It wasn't just the necessities, it was the luxuries. A weekend trip to a Vermont spa because Chloe was incredibly stressed. A pair of designer shoes she had to have for a gallery opening. Tickets to a Broadway show because it was their anniversary. Each request was a new test of my love, and I was terrified of failing. I started to feel like my love was quantifiable, measured in dollars and cents. The more I gave, the more I proved my devotion. In my mind, I wasn't just giving them money, I was investing in their happiness. I was buying my son a life I could never have afforded for myself. I was ensuring he could keep the beautiful, sophisticated woman he loved. It was, I told myself, an unwritten contract. I provide the financial foundation, and in return, I remain a cherished, central part of my son's life. I was the silent partner in their glamorous existence, the bedrock upon which their perfect world was built. I believed that my generosity, my endless sacrifices, were earning me an unbreakable bond, a place of honor in their new family. I was so wrong. The contract I thought I had, the one written in love and sacrifice, was in their eyes, written in disappearing ink. The 3 years leading up to the phone call were a masterclass in financial and emotional manipulation. Though I was too blind to see it at the time, my life had shrunk, becoming a support system for theirs. My modest catering pension, supplemented by my Social Security checks, was almost entirely funneled into what I privately called the Daniel and Chloe Lifestyle Fund. My own needs were an afterthought. I stopped buying new clothes, telling myself my old ones were perfectly fine. I cut back on my own groceries, eating simple soups and toasts so they could have their organic kale and grass-fed beef. A trip to the movies was a luxury I could no longer afford. My world was my small house, my garden, and the screen of my online banking portal, from which I would send portions of my soul to their account. The request became bolder, the sense of entitlement more pronounced. About a year before the wedding, Chloe called me in a manufactured panic. Her voice, usually so composed, was high and strained. "Evelyn, it's a disaster. My father just had a terrible business loss, and he's had to cut me off financially for a while. I don't know what we're going to do." She spoke as if this were a global catastrophe. I later found out through a stray comment from one of her cousins at a family gathering that her father's terrible business loss was that his investment portfolio had only grown by 10% that quarter instead of the expected 15. But at the time, I believed her. I pictured my poor son and his distraught partner on the verge of ruin. "Of course, dear, don't you worry," I said, my heart constricting with pity. "We'll manage. I can help." "Oh, Evelyn, you're a lifesaver," she'd gushed. "It's just temporary, of course, just until Dad gets back on his feet." Her father's feet, I would come to realize, were permanently planted on a bedrock of wealth he had no intention of sharing with his adult daughter, not when she had found such a willing and gullible benefactor in me. This fabricated crisis opened the floodgates. Now, there was no pretense of borrowing. My money was simply an extension of their own. There were vet bills for the purebred puppy they bought, a creature that ate food more expensive than anything I'd eaten in years. There were last-minute flights to destination weddings for their wealthy friends. There was the constant draining stream of small transactions, $100 dinners, $50 brunches, $30 artisanal cocktails. I saw it all on the shared credit card statement, the one I had naively added Daniel to for emergencies only. Their life was a parade of indulgent emergencies. The most galling part was the performance of poverty they put on whenever they deigned to visit my humble home. They would arrive in their new SUV, wearing clothes that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment used to, and sigh about how stressed they were about money. "It's just so hard to get ahead in this economy," Daniel would say, looking around my modest living room as if it were a physical representation of failure. "We're trying to save for a house," Chloe would add, picking an imaginary piece of lint off her cashmere sweater. "But everything is just so expensive. We're barely scraping by." And I, the fool, would nod in sympathy. I'd make them a simple, hearty dinner, which they would picket politely and send them home with a check tucked into an envelope. My little contribution to their struggle. Looking back, the audacity is breathtaking. They were living a life of luxury, funded by a retiree, while pretending to be struggling pioneers. It was a long-running play, and I was not only the sole audience member, but also the unwitting producer, financing the entire production from my dwindling life savings. I was so caught up in my role as the supportive matriarch that I never stopped to read the program and realize I was being cast as the tragic fool. The unwritten contract was simple. I gave them my money, and they gave me the illusion that I was still needed, still a mother. It was an illusion I paid for dearly, in every sense of the word. The hours after Chloe's phone call were a blur of numb disbelief. I must have sat on that hallway floor for an eternity, the patterns on the wallpaper swirling before my eyes. My mind kept replaying her words, trying to find a different meaning, an escape clause in the brutal finality of her statement. "We only invited special people." It wasn't a joke, it wasn't a mistake, it was a judgment, a verdict on my worth. Eventually, the physical ache in my joints forced me to my feet. I moved like an automaton, my body going through the motions of living while my spirit was in free fall. I made a cup of tea, my hands shaking so much that the cup rattled against the saucer. I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I had helped Daniel with his homework, where I had listened to his dreams and fears, and I stared out at the garden Robert had planted. The world outside was still beautiful, still functioning. The birds were still singing, the sun was still shining. It felt like a profound injustice. How could the world continue on as normal when mine had just been so completely upended? A dark, morbid curiosity, like a moth drawn to a flame, finally propelled me to my old desktop computer. My fingers, clumsy with shock, typed Chloe's name into the social media search bar. Her profile was public, a curated gallery of a perfect life. And there it was, the most recent post uploaded just 2 days ago. The headline read, The most magical day of my life. Surprise. We eloped. The first photo was of her and Daniel. He was in a sharp, tailored gray suit, a flower in his lapel. He looked handsome, happy, and like a complete stranger. Chloe was breathtaking in a simple but elegant white dress that clung to her slender frame. They were standing on a manicured lawn, a backdrop of rolling hills and a setting sun behind them. They were kissing, a tender, romantic kiss for the camera. They looked like a magazine advertisement for happiness, a happiness from which I had been deliberately and surgically excluded. I clicked through the album, each photo a fresh stab to my heart. There were dozens of them. Chloe with her parents, her father beaming with pride, her mother dabbing a tear from her eye. Chloe with her bridesmaids, all laughing and clinking champagne glasses. Daniel with his groomsmen, a group of slick, handsome young men I had never met. There were photos of the beautiful outdoor ceremony, the tastefully decorated reception, the multi-tiered cake. It wasn't a small, intimate affair. It was a full-blown, professionally photographed, exquisitely catered event. There must have been 50 guests, 50 special people. I zoomed in on a group shot. I saw Chloe's aunts, uncles, cousins. I saw their friends, laughing, dancing, celebrating. Every smiling face was a testament to my exclusion. I searched for any sign that my absence was noted, that it was a source of sadness or regret. But there was none. There was only joy. Unadulterated, complete joy, in a world where I apparently no longer existed. The caption beneath the album read, "A huge thank you to our amazing families and friends for sharing in our special day. It was a perfect, intimate celebration with the people who matter most." The people who matter most. That was it. The final, undeniable confirmation. It wasn't an oversight. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate, calculated act. They had taken my money for the venue, for the dress, for the rings, and they had used it to create a perfect day with everyone they considered important, and I was not on that list. The money was special enough to be invited, but the mother who gave it was not. A new emotion began to stir beneath the thick, suffocating blanket of my grief. It was hot and sharp, a tiny ember in the ashes of my broken heart. It was anger, a pure, cold, clarifying rage. The tears stopped. The shaking subsided. My vision, which had been blurred by sorrow, came into sharp focus. I looked at the picture of my smiling, happy son, and I no longer saw the little boy I had raised. I saw a thief, a con artist who had stolen not just my money, but my love, my trust, and my dignity. I closed the laptop. The click of the machine shutting down was a sound of finality. Something inside me had shut down too. The part of me that made excuses for him, the part that forgave his transgressions, the part that loved him unconditionally. Unconditional love, I realized with a sudden, brutal clarity, required one condition, that it not be used as a weapon against you. My love had been weaponized, turned into a tool for my own exploitation and humiliation. I stood up from the chair, no longer a grieving mother, but something else entirely. I walked to the filing cabinet in the corner of my study, the one where I kept all my financial records. I opened the drawer labeled Household Expenses. Inside, nestled among old utility bills and tax returns, was a thick folder I had labeled D&C. For 3 years, I had meticulously kept every receipt, every bank statement, every wire transfer confirmation related to them. I had done it out of a sense of order, a habit from my catering days. I never thought I would need it as evidence. I pulled out the folder, its weight now feeling different. It was no longer a record of my generosity. It was an indictment. It was the story of a long con, and I had the proof of every single transaction. As I sat there, the first tendrils of a plan began to form in my mind. It was a wild, audacious thought, born of pure fury. They had wanted a celebration with only special people. Fine. I would give them another one, a party they would never, ever forget. And this time, I would be the guest of honor. The 5 days following my discovery were the strangest of my life. I operated in a state of suspended animation, a chillingly calm detachment. The storm of grief and anger had passed, leaving behind an eerie, quiet landscape where a single clear objective now stood: retribution. I didn't cry anymore. I didn't wait for the phone to ring. I methodically began to prepare for a war they didn't even know had been declared. My first task was to take inventory of my arsenal. The D&C folder was my primary weapon. I spent an entire day spreading its contents across my dining room table. It was a paper trail of my own foolishness, but also of their calculated greed. I sorted everything by category: rent payments, 36 consecutive wire transfer slips, each for $1,500. Car payments, a neat stack of 36 canceled checks to the auto finance company. Utilities, groceries, emergencies, a chaotic pile of credit card statements, annotated with my own neat handwriting. Chloe, spa weekend. Daniel, client dinner. New puppy, vet bill. I then created a master spreadsheet. I entered every single dollar, every single date. The numbers on the screen grew, climbing to a sum that made me physically ill. When I hit the total button, a figure appeared that took my breath away: $97,750. Over 3 years, I had given them the equivalent of a brand new luxury car or a down payment on a house. A real house, not the rented fantasy they lived in. Seeing the number in stark black and white solidified my resolve. This wasn't about love or support anymore. This was grand larceny disguised as family dependency. I printed out the spreadsheet, a single-page summary of their breathtaking betrayal, and placed it at the front of the folder. My next step was reconnaissance. I needed to know their plans, to find the perfect stage for my final act. I knew from a stray comment Daniel had made months ago that Chloe's parents had gifted them a substantial sum of money as a wedding present. Money that was, of course, meant for a down payment on a house. I logged back onto Chloe's social media profile, my stomach no longer churning with hurt, but with the cold focus of a predator, and there it was, a post from 2 days ago. Chloe, posing with a set of keys in front of a sleek, modern condominium building. The caption read, "Making it official. So excited to start our new chapter in our very own place. Can't wait to host our official housewarming party and celebrate with all our favorite people." A housewarming party. It was perfect. A celebration of their new life, their supposed independence, funded by her parents' gift, and, indirectly, by the years of my money that had freed them from the basic financial responsibilities of adulthood. It would be a party filled with their special people, her wealthy family, their slick friends, the very crowd they had chosen over me. This would be my stage. Now I needed an invitation. For this, I had to do the hardest thing I'd done yet. I had to pretend to be the same loving, forgiving, foolish mother I had always been. I rehearsed the phone call in my head a dozen times, practicing the right tone of wounded but ultimately understanding matriarch. I had to swallow my rage, bury it deep, and perform the role of my life. I called Daniel's cell phone. He answered on the 4th ring, his voice wary. "Mom?" "Daniel, honey," I said, my voice carefully calibrated to sound a little shaky, a little sad. I know I haven't called. I was just very hurt. "Mom, I'm so sorry," he said, the relief in his voice palpable. He had been expecting a storm, and I was giving him a gentle rain. "Chloe and we wanted to tell you. It all just happened so fast." "I understand," I lied. the words tasting like ash in my mouth. I wish I could have been there. You're my only son. I let a small, pathetic sob escape my lips. It was a masterful touch. I know, Mom, and we feel terrible, he said, falling for it completely. We want to make it up to you. We just bought a new condo. We're having a housewarming party in a few weeks. You have to come. Please. There it was. The invitation. But I needed more than just an invitation. I needed to be at the center of the event. I needed control. Oh, Daniel, that's so sweet, I said. Listen, I know things have been strained, and I want to show you both that I'm truly happy for you. As a housewarming gift and as a wedding present, please, let me handle the catering for your party. My old company still gives me a great discount. It would be my honor to do it for you. There was a moment of stunned silence on his end. I could almost hear the cogs turning in his head, the calculation of how much money my offer would save them. The cost of catering a party for 50 of their high society friends would be astronomical. I was handing them a gift worth thousands of dollars. Mom, are you sure? He asked, his voice thick with feigned gratitude and real greed. That's incredibly generous. I want to do it, I insisted. It's the least I can do to celebrate your new life together. Let's put the past behind us, shall we? Yes, Mom, he said, his voice now positively gleeful. Absolutely. Chloe is going to be so thrilled. I hung up the phone, my hand steady this time. The mask of the grieving mother fell away, replaced by the grim satisfaction of a general whose Trojan horse had just been willingly dragged inside the enemy's gates. They thought they were getting a free party. What they were really getting was a front-row seat to their own public execution. The countdown had begun. The 3 weeks leading up to the housewarming party were a whirlwind of meticulous planning. I resurrected my old catering persona, dusting off my well-worn recipe books and supplier contacts. On the surface, I was the doting mother, throwing herself into creating the perfect celebration for her beloved son and his new wife. I had several phone calls with Chloe, who had transformed back into the sweet, charming girl I had first met. She was now my co-conspirator in party planning, completely oblivious to the fact that the party's true purpose was her own undoing. "Oh, Evelyn, that sounds divine!" she would trill when I suggested bacon-wrapped scallops and miniature crab cakes. My father adores seafood. And for the main course, I'd say, pen and paper in hand, I was thinking a beautiful beef tenderloin carving station, and perhaps a risotto bar with various toppings. A risotto bar! How chic! Evelyn, you think of everything, she gushed. You're making this so easy for us. We're so lucky to have you. The irony was so thick I could have sliced it with a catering knife. Every conversation was a dance of deception. I would listen to her prattle on about the guest list, which was a who's who of her family's social circle, doctors, lawyers, investment bankers. She spoke of them with reverence, emphasizing how important it was to make a good impression. Daddy's business partner will be there, so everything has to be perfect, she'd say, a hint of steel in her voice. Don't you worry, dear, I'd reply in my warmest, most reassuring tone. It will be a night no one will ever forget. And I meant every word. While I was planning the menu, I was also preparing my presentation. The centerpiece of my plan was a slideshow. A professionally made, seamlessly edited slideshow. I hired a young tech-savvy student from the local community college, telling him it was a sentimental tribute for my son's housewarming. He took my folder of documents, the bank statements, the canceled checks, the credit card bills, and scanned them all into high-resolution digital files. "What a lot of receipts, Mrs. Reed," he commented, looking a bit puzzled. "My son is very nostalgic," I lied smoothly. "He loves to remember every little thing." We worked together to weave the financial documents into a narrative. The slideshow would begin with heartwarming photos of Daniel as a child, slowly transitioning to photos of him and Chloe. It would look, for the first few minutes, like a standard tear-jerking family tribute. But then, at my signal, the images would change. The photo of their first apartment would be subtly watermarked with the wire transfer slip for the security deposit. A romantic photo of them on a ski trip would be followed by a full-screen image of the credit card statement that showed I had paid for the flights and hotel. A picture of Chloe showing off her engagement ring would dissolve into the bill from the jeweler, with a line item showing my $5,000 contribution. The pièce de résistance was the final slide. It was a simple, elegant graphic displaying the grand total from my spreadsheet, $97,750, underneath the heading, A Mother's Investment in Happiness. The tech student did a magnificent job. The final presentation was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive digital art. He loaded it onto a small flash drive, which I tucked safely into my purse. My bomb was armed and ready. The day before the party, I did my final preparations. I hired a professional audio-visual company to set up a large projection screen and a sound system in Daniel and Chloe's new living room. I told Chloe it was a surprise, a way to show a celebratory video montage. She was ecstatic. "Evelyn, you are just too good to us," she said. "I can't wait to see it." The catering staff, old colleagues of mine who were loyal and discreet, arrived at the condo on the afternoon of the party. I had hired them not just for their culinary skills, but for their ability to be invisible. They set up the carving stations, arranged the hors d'oeuvres, and chilled the champagne with quiet efficiency. The condo itself was a monument to their unearned wealth. It was all glass and chrome, with minimalist furniture and abstract art on the walls. It felt cold and impersonal, like a hotel lobby. There was no warmth, no history, no soul. It was a stage set, and tonight the play would reach its dramatic conclusion. As the guests began to arrive, I slipped into my role. I was the gracious, self-effacing mother-in-law, a humble supporting character in my son's glamorous life. I wore my deep blue silk dress, the one I had bought for the wedding. It felt fitting. It was a reminder of the original betrayal, a silent promise to myself of the justice that was about to be served. I smiled. I mingled. I accepted compliments on the food with demure thanks. Oh, it was nothing. I was just so happy to do it for the kids. Daniel and Chloe were in their element, floating through the crowd, accepting congratulations and compliments on their beautiful new home. They were the king and queen of their little kingdom, completely unaware that their reign was about to come to a very public and humiliating end. I watched them, my heart a cold, steady drum in my chest. There was no sadness left, no love, only a profound, surgical focus. The performance was about to begin. The party was in full swing by 8 o'clock. The living room, with its panoramic city views, was filled with the sound of clinking glasses and sophisticated laughter. I moved through the crowd, a ghost in my own production, catching snippets of conversation. Everyone was fawning over Daniel and Chloe, congratulating them on their success, on their beautiful home, on their perfect life. "You two have done so well for yourselves," I heard a portly man with a red face say to Daniel, clapping him on the back. "To build all this from scratch, at your age, it's truly impressive." Daniel just smiled, a picture of modest pride. "We've worked hard," he said, the lie rolling off his tongue with practiced ease. Chloe was holding court by the floor-to-ceiling windows, telling a group of admiring women about her grueling job at the art gallery. "It's creatively fulfilling, of course," she said with a sigh, "but it barely pays the bills. We've had to be so careful with our finances to afford this place. I had to physically restrain myself from laughing out loud. Her idea of being careful with finances was using my credit card for a $300 brunch. I continued my silent patrol, my smile fixed in place, my eyes absorbing every detail. I was a sponge, soaking up their hypocrisy. This was the world they had chosen, a world built on illusion and financed by deceit. They had curated every aspect of their lives to project an image of effortless success, of self-made brilliance, and their audience was buying it completely. The admiration in the room was thick, tangible. It was the fuel they ran on, and I was about to pour a tanker truck of ice-cold water all over their fire. At 9:30, just as the party reached its crescendo, Chloe's father, a distinguished-looking man named Mr. Thompson, tapped a spoon against his wine glass to get everyone's attention. He stood in the center of the room, beaming with paternal pride. "If I could have your attention for just a moment," he began, his voice booming with the confidence of a man used to being listened to. "I just want to say a few words about these two incredible young people." A hush fell over the room. This was it, the opening act for my main event. "When Chloe was a little girl," he continued, his eyes misting over, "I always knew she was destined for great things. But seeing her here tonight, in this beautiful home she has built with her wonderful husband Daniel, well, it exceeds all my expectations. They are a testament to what hard work, ambition, and a true partnership can achieve. They started with nothing, and they have built this life for themselves on their own 2 feet. I have never been more proud." He raised his glass. "To Daniel and Chloe, may your life together be as beautiful as you have made this home." A chorus of "To Daniel and Chloe" echoed through the room as everyone drank. Daniel and Chloe looked at each other, their faces glowing with pride and emotion. They kissed, a perfect cinematic moment for their adoring fans. They were the heroes of their own story. As the applause died down, I made my move. I walked calmly towards Mr. Thompson, my expression one of gentle maternal warmth. "That was a beautiful speech, Mr. Thompson," I said, my voice just loud enough for those nearby to hear. "If you don't mind, I'd like to say a few words as well. As Daniel's mother, I have a little tribute I'd like to share." Chloe and Daniel exchanged a look of pleased surprise. My performance as the forgiven, doting mother was so convincing that they saw this as the final, public seal of approval on their new life. They thought I was about to sing their praises too. "Of course, Evelyn," Chloe said, gesturing graciously towards the center of the room. "We'd love that." I took my place, a small, 68-year-old woman in a blue silk dress, facing a crowd of 53 of the city's elite. I smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. In my hand, I held a small remote control. I nodded to the AV technician I had hired, who was standing discreetly in the corner. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate this wonderful milestone," I began, my voice steady and clear. Mr. Thompson spoke of how proud he is of what Daniel and Chloe have built. And I am too. It truly is a remarkable story. In fact, I was so moved by their journey of self-reliance that I put together a little slideshow to commemorate it. A look back at how they got here, all on their own. I pressed the button on the remote. Behind me, the large projection screen flickered to life. The first image appeared, a photo of a 5-year-old Daniel, beaming with a gap-toothed grin, holding a finger painting. The crowd murmured in appreciation. It was all so sweet, so sentimental. Daniel and Chloe smiled, basking in the warm glow of nostalgia. They had no idea that the Trojan horse was now open and the soldiers were pouring out. The slideshow began gently, a soft piano melody playing in the background. Photos of Daniel's childhood flashed across the screen. School plays, baseball games, family vacations. The crowd smiled. I saw Daniel whisper something to Chloe, and she squeezed his hand. They were relaxed, confident, completely unprepared for the ambush. Like any mother, I always wanted the best for my son, I said, my voice a smooth, narrative overlay. I invested everything I had into his future. As I said the word invested, the photo of Daniel on his college graduation day appeared on the screen. For a split second, a scanned image of a $5,000 check I had written to the university for his final semester's tuition was superimposed over it, transparent but visible, before fading away. A few people in the front row frowned, a flicker of confusion in their eyes. The slideshow continued, now showing the early days of Daniel and Chloe's relationship, a picture of them smiling in front of their first apartment. I was so thrilled when they found their first place together, I narrated, a real launching pad for their independent lives. This time, the image of the wire transfer confirmation for their $2,000 security deposit stayed on the screen for a full 2 seconds, clear as day. The murmuring in the room grew a little louder. I saw Chloe's smile falter. They worked so hard, often struggling to make ends meet, I continued, my voice dripping with false sincerity. The screen now showed a romantic photo of them on a beach in Mexico. It was immediately followed by a full-screen shot of my credit card statement, with the charges for 2 round-trip flights to Cancun and a 5-night stay at an all-inclusive resort circled in red. The total was $2,800. The silence in the room was now absolute. The piano music had faded out, leaving only the sound of my calm, steady voice. Everyone was staring at the screen, their faces a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension. I saw Chloe's father, Mr. Thompson, take a half-step forward, his proud smile replaced by a look of utter bewilderment. Chloe's face had gone from pale to a blotchy, furious red. Daniel was staring at his shoes, unable to look at anyone. Chloe always had such beautiful taste, I went on, my voice becoming cooler, sharper. A photo of Chloe at a party, wearing a stunning designer dress, flashed on the screen. It was followed by the receipt from the boutique. Price, $950. Paid by Evelyn Reed. She deserved the best wedding, a magical day with only the most special people. The screen now showed one of their official wedding photos, the beautiful shot of them kissing against the sunset. And then, one by one, the receipts appeared. The $500 deposit for the venue. The $1,000 transfer labeled dress emergencies. The bill for the wedding rings, showing my $2,000 contribution. The guests were now openly whispering, turning to look at the mortified couple, then back at the damning evidence on the screen. The air was thick with scandal. The heroes of the evening were being unmasked as frauds, live and in high definition. I let the final wedding receipt linger on the screen for a moment before moving to my grand finale. I clicked the remote one last time. The photos disappeared, replaced by a simple, elegant slide. At the top, in large, bold letters, it read, "A mother's investment in happiness," and below it, a meticulously itemized list began to scroll, detailing every major expense for the past 3 years. Rent payments, 36 months. $54,000 car payments and insurance, 36 months. $18,000 utilities, $5,400 groceries and dining, $7,200 vacations and luxuries, $9,150 wedding contributions, $30,500. As the list scrolled, a running total at the bottom of the screen climbed higher and higher. The room was so quiet you could have heard a pin drop. The only sound was the soft click of the scrolling list and my voice, now cold and clear as a winter morning, reading out some of the highlights. $500 for a VIP bottle service at a nightclub. $300 for a couple's massage at a day spa. $2,000 for a purebred puppy, which, by the way, I hear is a lovely dog. When the list finally reached the end, the final, staggering total appeared on the screen in a font size usually reserved for declarations of war. $97,750. I let the number hang in the air for a full 10 seconds. It was a death sentence for their reputation. So, I would like to propose a toast, I said, picking up a glass of champagne from a nearby tray. I turned to face my son and his wife. Chloe was openly weeping now, not tears of sadness, but of pure, unadulterated rage and humiliation. Daniel looked like a statue, his face completely drained of color. "To Daniel and Chloe," I said, my voice ringing with triumph, "for teaching me the true price of an invitation, and for showing us all what it truly means to build a life on someone else's back. Congratulations on your new home. You didn't earn it, but you certainly paid for it, with my money." I drank the champagne in one long, satisfying gulp, and then I set the glass down with a soft click. The spell was broken, the room erupted. The aftermath was pure, unadulterated chaos. For a moment, no one moved, as if the entire room was collectively processing the public detonation they had just witnessed. Then, Mr. Thompson, Chloe's father, strode towards me, his face a thundercloud of fury. But his anger, I was surprised to see, was not directed at me. He turned to his daughter. "Chloe, is this true?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. Chloe couldn't even speak. She just sobbed, a sound of utter defeat. He then turned to Daniel. "Did you let this woman, your own mother, pay your way for 3 years while you pretended to be a self-made man?" Daniel flinched as if struck. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He just stared at his father-in-law, his eyes wide with panic. The guests began to leave, not discreetly, but in a rush, as if fleeing the scene of a horrific accident. They averted their eyes from Daniel and Chloe, their whispers like the rustling of dry leaves. Can you believe it? How shameful. That poor woman. Their social circle, the very foundation of their fragile ego, was abandoning them en masse. Their kingdom had crumbled in less than 10 minutes. I watched it all unfold with a strange sense of detachment. I had unleashed the storm, and now I was simply an observer in the eye of it. I felt no pity. I felt no remorse. I felt only the clean, quiet satisfaction of a debt finally being paid. I walked over to my son. I stood before him, the boy I had loved more than life itself, and I looked at him as if for the first time. I saw not a man, but a hollow shell, a weak, entitled child who had never grown up. "The bank of Mom is now permanently closed," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "The keys to my house, which I know you still have, will be on my doorstep by morning. Do not call me. Do not contact me. As far as I am concerned, you ceased to be my son the day you decided I wasn't special enough for your wedding." I turned to Chloe, who was now being half supported by her apoplectic mother. "And you, my dear," I said, a small, cold smile on my lips. "I hope you enjoy your beautiful home. You'll need it, because I imagine your primary source of funding has just been discontinued." With that, I picked up my purse, nodded to my catering staff who were watching with wide, stunned eyes, and walked towards the door. As I left, I heard Mr. Thompson's voice roar through the nearly empty apartment. "You will pay her back! You will pay back every single cent if it's the last thing you do." I didn't look back. I walked out into the cool night air, leaving the ashes of their life smoldering behind me. For the first time in 3 years, I felt light. I felt free. I had lost a son, but I had regained myself. And as I drove home, through the quiet, sleeping streets, I knew a new day was dawning, a day that belonged only to me. And so, my life began again. In the weeks that followed the party, an event that became a whispered legend in Chloe's social circles, I systematically erased Daniel and Chloe from my world. I changed the locks on my doors, updated my will to leave everything to a local animal shelter, and blocked their numbers on my phone. They tried to reach out, of course. First came the angry, accusatory texts, then the pleading voicemails. Finally, a long, rambling letter from Daniel arrived, full of self-pity and blame, but not a single genuine word of remorse. I read it, and then I burned it in my fireplace, watching the ashes of his excuses float up the chimney. I was done. The healing could finally begin. I started small. I took the $200 I would have spent on their car insurance that month and re-enrolled in the pottery class I had abandoned years ago. I felt the wet clay spin beneath my hands, and I remembered the joy of creating something for myself. I used the $1,500 from their next month's rent to book a trip to the Grand Canyon, a place Robert and I had always dreamed of seeing. Standing on the edge of that vast, magnificent expanse, I felt my own problems shrink into insignificance. I was a part of something bigger, something ancient and resilient. Slowly, I began to rebuild my life, not around the needs of others, but around my own desires. I reconnected with old friends. I volunteered at the library. I filled my house with music and the smell of baking for myself, for the sheer joy of it. I discovered that loneliness is not the absence of other people, but the absence of oneself. And I had finally found myself again. About a year later, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that Daniel and Chloe had sold the condo. Her parents had forced them to pay back some of the money. They had moved to a small apartment in a less fashionable part of the city. He was still at the same job, his big promotion never having materialized. And she, for the first time in her adult life, had to get a real, full-time job. I felt nothing, no satisfaction, no pity. They were simply strangers now, characters in a story whose final chapter I had already written. And so, that is how I took back my life. They thought they could take everything from me, but they forgot the most valuable thing I owned, my self-respect. So I ask you, have you ever had to face a betrayal so deep it threatened to erase you? Share your story with me in the comments and tell me where in the world you are listening from. Knowing that there are other brave souls out there gives me strength. Remember, even after the darkest night, the sun will always rise. Close your eyes and remember your own power. Until the next story.